Researcher notes. When I decided to go to my son's house to meet his new pet, a cat he had literally pulled from the dead, I took with me everything I needed to care for the animal: litter trays, fillers, and other small things. On the way, I thought, it's strange, but it's been a long time since I've rescued anyone myself. As I turned onto the street where my son lived, I noticed a flock of vultures down the road. These birds are everywhere, hunting the remains of forest animals hit by cars. One of them stood in the middle of the road, holding something in its beak and twitching nervously from side to side. I slowed down, drove closer, and saw that the bird had dropped its prey right on the pavement and quickly moved away. The prey was a small mouse that was so frightened that it could hardly move. However, this mouse turned out to be unusual. I stopped the car, ran outside, and chased the hungry birds away. When I looked more closely, I realized that the mouse in front of me was not a mouse at all, but a small possum. As I looked around, I heard another faint hiss and found a second baby nearby. Mentally, I kept repeating to myself, this just can't be happening. Chasing the birds away, I ran back to the car, grabbed the cat litter box, and returned to the scene of the tragedy. The scavenger birds started to approach again, but I dispersed them again. I put the dead female in the litter box, even though half of her head had already been eaten. Then I gathered up all 5 babies and scrutinized the area to make sure no one was left behind. Finally, I hurried home while calling my husband. He contacted a veterinarian who gave us the coordinates of the nearest wildlife rescue center. We took the entire possum family there. There we had them admitted. I filled out the necessary paperwork and waited for news of the babies' checkups. I was especially concerned about the ones that remained attached to the mother's teats. The technician told me, don't worry, all 9 babies are perfectly fine. Turns out I didn't realize that opossums are marsupial animals, and the female had 4 more little creatures hidden in her pouch. So I stopped to save 1 life, and it turns out I saved as many as 9. On the way home, I couldn't hold back the tears. And just as we were driving back, my husband got a call from a friend offering him a new 3-year job contract. This was incredibly important because after the pandemic, my husband had been unable to find a suitable position for a long time. So, if you ask God for help, remember that He can ask you for help too. Those thoughts came back to me. It's been a long time since I've saved anyone. Thank you all. I apologize for the length of this story. When I was a child, I used to play an amazing game. I would watch random people on the street and suddenly start seeing vivid images, like kaleidoscope images, changing lightning fast and chaotically. For example, I imagined a kitchen with oilcloth on the table, a trash bucket in the hallway, and a strange odor that reminded me of the scent of adult clothes in the closet. At that time, I was a very young girl who had not even gone to school yet, so I couldn't think of anything. One day, I met a quiet, thin man who looked rather modest, but in my mind, I suddenly saw terrible pictures of cruelty, as if shown through his eyes. A woman suffocating in his arm. Sometimes I saw rooms of children with toys, sometimes other scenes, quite different. Of course, one would think that these were just children's fantasies, but one day, my mother invited me to go with her to her friend's dacha. Before the trip, I imagined a table standing next to the stove and plates with pancakes on it. When I asked my mom if there would be pancakes, she laughed and confirmed my guess. When we arrived, everything was exactly as I had imagined: table, oven, and fresh pancakes. These coincidences happened to me quite often. I never understood where these visions came from, but they always amazed me with their accuracy. Perhaps they were really fantasies, but so realistic that they seemed like true visions. This gift or ability remained a mystery to me. And to this day, I still sometimes remember those moments in my childhood when the world revealed itself to me through the smallest details and images. This story has been passed down in our family from generation to generation. I first heard it when I was still a child, and then repeatedly recalled and retold the story again. It is about a close friend of my mom's who once got into a very difficult situation. He was in a big hurry to get home, as he had important guests waiting for him. However, his work had been delayed and his bosses did not want to let him go early. Despite the urgency of the situation, he could not explain the reason for his departure and had to stay longer than usual. Realizing that he was at least 35 minutes late, he rushed to the bus stop in a sweat of despair. It's a long journey ahead, and the guests could arrive at any moment. And then something inexplicable happens. Suddenly he finds himself surrounded by a thick fog, as if he was in another world. He woke up in front of his driveway, having no idea how he had gotten here. Luckily, he'd gotten home 10 minutes before the guests arrived, and had even taken the time to tidy up the house a bit. For the rest of his life, he tried to figure out what had happened that day. The story stirred his imagination, and he shared it with many, hoping to find someone who had experienced a similar thing. No one could give him an answer, but he continued to believe that the event was a true miracle. Here I will suggest that, according to some knowledgeable people, it is our consciousness that is the measure of space and time. Perhaps due to this peculiarity of consciousness, some people sometimes find themselves able to move instantly from one place to another. This requires an extremely strong intention. One winter morning around 7:15, I was driving to work. It was bitterly cold outside, about -25 degrees. We stopped at a traffic light, and I noticed a boy of about 7 years old walking along the sidewalk with his dog. At that moment I thought, what a responsible child. Despite this weather, he is out with his dog for a walk before school. I felt a little sad, because I had dreamed of having a dog since childhood, but never decided to get one. The traffic light switched, and we continued driving. After about 2 kilometers, we stopped at the traffic light again, and I saw the same boy with the same dog. At first, I couldn't believe my eyes, because there was no traffic between these two places, and the road was completely free. Moreover, I remembered this child well: his cap, his down jacket, and the breed of the dog. The boy was walking with the same calm step, in no hurry. I want to share another story that happened to me recently. I came home one evening, took off my beret, and carefully put it on the shelf. In the morning, getting ready to go out, I couldn't find it. I searched every possible and impossible place, but the beret was nowhere to be found. The disappearance remained unsolved. About a month passed, and the situation was repeated with another beret. I was confused and even appealed for help to the houseboy and Barabashka, but to no avail. The berets disappeared without a trace. The other day I came home again, took off the third beret, and hung it on the shelf. But soon I needed to go out urgently, and I started looking for my headgear. What was my surprise when I couldn't find it? I was already prepared for the story to repeat itself. But suddenly I noticed on the shelf not only the missing third beret, but also the 2 previous ones, which I thought were lost forever. Just like that, all 3 berets were suddenly there. Many amazing things have happened to me as well. One of these miracles is related to the period of pregnancy of my youngest daughter, whom we named Mary in honor of the Virgin Mary. One day, she decided to go to the market to buy vegetables. Suddenly, I had a craving for an orange, but I was too shy to tell my mom, knowing that her financial situation was not the best. It was 2005. My mom came back from the market, and I offered to help her with the bags. While she was changing her clothes, I went over to one of the bags and started unpacking it. Inside were potatoes, onions, and herbs. I was pouring the vegetables into a bowl, and suddenly a huge and very beautiful orange slipped out of the bag. I was shocked and immediately asked my mom where it came from and how she guessed that it was the one I wanted. My mom was puzzled and answered that she did not know where the orange came from because there were no fruit sellers nearby. So, by God's will, my little daughter got the gift she wanted. viewers thought. I reflect on the fact that perhaps we are simply reading information about future events and taking those thoughts as our own. However, in my opinion, this connection may be two-way. I will not elaborate on my cases, as one of them has caused a certain resonance. The bottom line is that this connection probably works both ways. If we can change our thoughts with an effort of will, events can unfold differently. So I urge you, do not wish harm to anyone, forgive and believe in good things. It is possible that the world seems bad to us only because we want it to be so. It was in our childhood, when we naughty kids liked to test the limits of what we could do. One day we were walking late, almost into the night, and decided to show each other our courage. We stopped at a store with thick glass windows, so thick that it seemed impossible to break them. I picked up a half brick and took a swing, preparing to throw it through the window. But at that moment, it was as if I had stepped out of my body and was watching from the outside. I saw the brick slip from my index finger, leaving a cloud of dust, and slowly float toward the window. My hand floated down smoothly, and I looked around at my friends, noticing their astonished faces, then shifted my gaze to the window, following the brick projectile with my eyes. The brick touched the glass, and the display case began to bend. I thought, oh, it's soft. It won't break. And then, like magic, the sound came on. I heard a loud explosion and the sound of broken glass. At the same time, I noticed the headlights on the road. I knew for sure that it was a police motorcycle, Ural, although I saw only a spot of light about 150 meters away from us. "Run!" I shouted to my friends, and we ran toward the river. After running about 50 meters, we noticed that the motorcycle turned behind us. I ran as hard as I could, feeling that I was starting to pull away from the others. But suddenly I realized that something was wrong. Time seemed to slow down, and I saw my legs no longer keeping up with my desire to escape. Everything around me became viscous, like a thick sour cream. It was like I was running ahead of my own body, looking back at it, which had somehow fallen behind. Soon I stopped myself. My body stumbled over a small hill, and I barely made it back into it in time to avoid falling and possibly breaking my neck. I never told anyone about that incident. It was embarrassing. I apologized for the broken window. Thank you for the new stories. I want to share my story. At that time, I was studying at the university. One day, I got off the trolley bus, crossed the road, and suddenly a vivid picture appeared before my eyes. I see myself going into the university building, taking off my jacket, handing it over to the check room, going up the stairs. At the top there is a table on which is a portrait of a woman with dark, curly, short hair. She is about 55 years old, maybe a little older. The woman looks nice. The portrait has a black ribbon in the corner, indicating her passing. There are carnations next to it, and the framed text is a brief biography of the woman, her first name. I thought, well, it's just a dream. Then I opened the door of the university, went inside, took off my jacket, gave it to the check room, and went up the stairs. And there's a table, a portrait, flowers. I was shocked. My mouth opened in surprise. It turned out that one of the teachers of our institute died unexpectedly. Getting a little off topic, I'll tell another story related to my mom. She was about 18, 19 years old when she had a dream. In the dream, she found herself in a green-colored house. Inside was a large, empty room. On the walls hung two portraits, next to the kitchen and the hay. In general, she dreamed of a real house which still exists in the village where I was born. At that time, my grandmother was just choosing a house to buy. Mom did not tell anyone about her dream, but was shocked when they bought this very house. At that time, my mom was in town, in college, and was not involved in the choice of housing.